Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining in to listen to this presentation, and I hope you find it informative. It's actually on a reasonably tough topic, describing the ultimate cow. And I said it's not as easy as you think. It actually it isn't. I'm going to present some sort of preliminary research work to you, and hopefully you'll get something of value. But it's not simple to do that. I also want to acknowledge the contribution of Rebecca Hickson and a whole lot of team of people through the Beef Cooperative Research Centre in Australia who collected and analysed this data. So let's say that we've got a cow that looks like this, and we might think, well, is this the sort of cow that we want? And if not, why not? And what is it about this cow that makes her interesting, different or special? And there might be different ways that we would describe this cow. So we could think about, well, what are cow descriptors? What do we mean by cow descriptors, and why do we care? And then when we're describing certain types of cows, can we identify a sweet spot? Is there a real particular type of looking or type of cow that really is very sweet in terms of being productive and capturing all the things that we would like to have? So here's one way of describing cows with a whole lot of different skeletal structures. But what I want to focus on is much more on the genetic description of the cows. And if we look at what traits are recorded at the moment by the Angus breed, I'm using Angus as an example because they've got the most performance recorded cattle. And if you look on figure 1, it shows the traits that they're selecting for. They have a big influence on profit. So live weight has a big influence. The number of calves or the calf weaning rate, the amount of meat and the quality of that meat in terms of marbling, but also things like calving ease. And then that leads to then putting weightings on the breeding values. So there's weightings on calving ease, there's weightings on 600-day weight, intramuscular fat, which leads to meat quality, reducing days to calving, which is associated with weaning rate and just having calves earlier, and improving beef yield. And the bottom one here is one I want to touch on, even though it's only 4%. It's one that does concern people because what it's about is actually reducing mature cow weight. And the reason we do it is because we want cows that are smaller and eat less, but produce calves that are large and well muscled. The problem with selecting for cows that are smaller is at the moment by selecting on weaning weight, we don't know whether we're just selecting cows that are skinnier or whether they're genuinely smaller. So that's what we want to address. If we think about what a skinny cow looks like, well, we all know what a skinny cow looks like. This is an example of a very light body condition score. In Australia, we score body condition from 1 to 5, and I understand in New Zealand you use a 1 to 9 or more scale. If you just think of your numbers divided by 2, you'll get very close numbers to us. So got some traits here. I'm going to work through some tables and a fair few numbers. We recorded 3,746 Angus cows at variable times, but when they weaned their first calf. So at weaning time of their first calf, we weighed those cows, and we weighed lots of them, 2,700 of them, again when they wean their second calf. And hopefully you can see, if you look at the minimum and maximum weights, there's a big range of cow weights in that. There's a range of cow types, which you'll sort of see, but clearly a very big range in weights, over 800 kilos down to less than 300. Some were small and skinny, some were tall and skinny, some were tall and fat. And if we look at the heritability on the right-hand side there, one of the things we're interested in is how much of the variation that we see is actually genetic. And that's what the heritability tells us, 30% for weaning weight, or for weight at weaning of their first calf, and 53% for weight at weaning of their second calf. So we then want to look at what's the body condition score. We had virtually the full range of body condition scores in this data set, from 1 to 5. And if we look at the average for starters, it was 3.4 at the weaning of first calf, 3.5 at weaning of second calf. These were across multiple years, so we had some good and some tough years in that time. The heritability of that is only about 15 to 18%, and so that being lower prevents us from being able to make genetic progress in a trait. So what I want to do is to think about, can we describe cows in a way that is more accurate than trying to apply a condition score? There's a visual score, and because it's in sort of different categories, it's what we call categorical data, it's a bit clunky, and it leads to a lower heritability. So what we did then was we also measured height, and height ranged from 118 to 151 centimetres. Height is highly heritable, and you can see on the right hand side there, almost 60% of the variation between cows within a given group was genetic variation, so quite highly heritable. So what we want to do is combine that height measure with the weight measure, and I want to think about a trait which is weight adjusted for height, and I'm going to ask the question, is this actually potentially a better measure of cow condition or of cow type, weight adjusted for height? Is it better than looking at body condition score? Given that just measuring them for weight, I think, has some concerns in that we may be actually selecting for skinny cows, or we can't distinguish between, say, a tall skinny cow and a smaller frame fatter cow. So we created these traits called net weight at weaning, which is simply weight adjusted for height. And the variation in the weights was still very, very high, so from 236 kilos up to 750. And the heritability of that is quite good, and 35% higher than the heritability of body condition score, which is what we expect. A trait we can actually measure has more highly heritable than a visual score. So maybe that's useful. So let's look at how these things are related to the cow type. So first I want to look at how height is related to different things. And height is quite highly correlated to weight at both times, so 0.7 and 0.68. It's still related to net weight, even though we've adjusted for height, it's still related genetically. And to cow condition, eye muscle area, P8 fat depth and rib fat depth of the cows, the correlation is very, very low with height. If we then add an extra trait and say, what about cow condition score? Well, cow condition score was related to our weights at weaning, especially at weaning of the second calf. The cow condition score was reasonably highly correlated, 0.74. And if we actually look at cow condition score being related to the things that we can measure, now we measured these things, and these are good descriptors of cow type, or cow condition, eye muscle area, P8, which is the rump fat depth, and the rib fat depth. But you then got to get a scanner in to do it, and is it actually worth? We've got to still work that out. Is it actually worth measuring these things? But cow condition was actually, even though it was less heritable, was actually quite highly genetically correlated to these traits, which is interesting. So then let's look at our net weight and see how highly correlated that is. Net weight is still related to weight. It is related to cow condition, 0.51 and 0.71. And then if we look at eye muscle area and the two fat depths, our net weight is quite highly related to them, but actually not as high as what condition score is. So condition score is less highly heritable, so measured less genetically, less accurately, but possibly is even more highly correlated to the traits that we're interested in than using net weight. So the jury's still out a bit on this trait. Let's just look a little bit at what things we actually do have in our tool bag to describe cows now. So what I've got here is some carcass EBVs, so genetic correlations with carcass traits. I'm not sure if you can see the word traits behind my ugly face. But we've got eye muscle area, P8 fat depth, rib fat depth, and eye muscle area. Intramuscular fat. These are the traits that are adjusted for weight and measured on young animals. How do these things relate to height of cows? Well, the fat depths are both reasonably negatively correlated. So taller cows tend to have less fat, which is what people observe in their cattle breeding. In terms of net weight, not that highly correlated with those things. But let's look at how they're actually related to cow eye muscle area, P8 fat depth, rib fat depth, and intramuscular fat. And they're all reasonably highly correlated. Not super high, like certainly not 1. The correlation's not 1, which would mean all the variation in young animals is associated with variation in cows. But the correlation is reasonably high. And so we're seeing correlations around about 0.6. So that tells me that if we want to, with our current tools, if we want to change the composition of cows genetically, that we can do it by using our existing carcass EBVs. So I just want to show you that as an example. Here's a pasture growth curve, which you'd be well familiar with. Peaks of feed in spring, and depending on how far south you are, it may be into summer. And cows gain and lose condition throughout that annual cycle. So what I've got here is some high and low fat, genetically fat cows, and we are fed on two levels of nutrition. The dotted lines are high nutrition, the solid lines are low nutrition, and it just shows that the genetically high fat cows, the blue ones, were always fatter than the genetically low fat cows as they went through the annual cycles. So, and that was based on the carcass EBVs. So it shows we can use the carcass EBVs to change body composition of cows if that's something that we want to be doing. So what's some conclusions here? For bull breeders, we need to select on a balanced breeding objective. Using the selection index is the smartest way to do it. It combines all the traits into an overall profit. We think that there may be some merit in measuring cow height at the same as weight. It may be better than condition score because it's more highly heritable, but then again, it may not be because the jury's still out in terms of which one's actually going to give a better indication of cow true condition. Scanning cows, ultrasound scanning of them is the gold standard for sure. We're not certain if that investment is worthwhile at this stage. So bull breeders also need to focus on cow culling strategies and recording the fate of those cows and building that into breed plan records. For bull buyers, again, focus on selecting on a balanced breeding objective using an index. If you want to alter cow composition, then you can use your carcass EBVs to do that. And they, in the near future, will get a lot more accurate with genomic testing of carcasses, and very likely, even though that's focused on carcasses, very likely that will lead to more accurate EBVs for cows. Use your visual condition score for management. Anything that I say that devalues that slightly for an individual animal's genetics description is still worthwhile for management. Bottom line is, don't rely on genetics to solve poor management decisions, but focus on all aspects of your business. And genetics is an important part, but just one part of your business management decisions. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and be good to keep communicating with you in some way in the future.